night. And she was one of the 70 people who stopped into the square. Okay? So I talked to her and asked why and things like that. One thing that really touched me, she said, I was here for just one simple reason. I was here to find the purpose. I see myself here as a purpose. That's why I spent 6 nights here. Okay. So the next generation, when I talk to them, we as a Gen X, I myself as a Gen X. On one hand, I say, wow, I'm really proud to have the next generation as committed, as engaged to change the world. But at the same time, I feel a bit, I have some question mark in my mind. Because when my main job, I went to different corporations to do leadership training. Whenever I talk to Gen X manager or baby boomer managers, when I said, what's the biggest problem in the organization? They always say, oh, I can't stand the new generation. They're not committed, they always change jobs, they always look at the cell phone. So it seems to be a very big difference, right? If so committed young students, so passionate, we as an HR professional said, wow, if that energy can put into our organization, that'd be great, right? Our organization will be very, very different, okay? So that's kind of my, I have been constantly looking at chances to really understand the different situation. So let me introduce a little bit myself. I spend quite a bit of time going to different corporations to do leadership training, mostly the Gen X or the baby boomers. But I also spend quite a bit of time mentoring, coaching young people. My company and myself have been working very closely with Hong Kong UST, the business school, engineering school, social science. We are there for the past 3 years helping the next generation. I also do a lot of training and leadership development in mainland China. A few years ago, I often go to Tsinghua and Beijing University to me, it's more than teaching. They teach me what is the next generations are thinking in China. So today, the agenda, I'm going to talk about a few things. First of all, when I talk to a number of people during my training, there are lots of perceptions. There are lots and lots of perceptions. When I talk to the Gen Y, the post-80 generation, there are lots and lots of thinking when they talk about their boss. When I talk to the Gen X manager, they have lots and lots of impression on the other generation. So I want to talk about that. Some of them are merely myth. Some of them are some truth in it. So I spent 6 years in my PhD doing a research to really understand that. I wanted to share some of the research findings today. And the key thing I want to do is also highlight, is there a fundamental difference of leadership concept between different generations? Because if that is the case, we need to drastically change our leadership development program, right? If there's not, then we can still continue to do the same thing that we've been doing, right? So that's the question I want to share some light based on my research. And you know, in Hong Kong, the last thing they want to learn is research, because research is boring. I want to distill that into a few tips at the end, okay? But I also need your help, because you say, oh, those are just research, those are not my experience. So in the very beginning, I asked you in the cell phone to do some polling. So we will also see at this room, what are some of the perceptions, what are some of the thinking among this room, and see if that matches the overall research that I found, okay? All right, so let's look at the definition first. When we talk, there are many different terms, many different terms. Oh, by the way, my PowerPoint, if you want it, you can leave your business card at the end. I will be sending my PowerPoint to all of you. If you're interested, just drop your business card, okay? And I will send the PowerPoint to you, okay? So first of all, definition. There are 80後、90後、90後 that's the mainland Chinese term. In Taiwan, that's called 草莓族. Okay, the strawberry generation. Strawberries is in the that is very dedicated. Okay, in Japan, they call it the 海賊王族. Okay, 海賊王族, because they grow up with the cartoon 海賊王. Okay, so and in U.S. But put things into perspective. Harry Potter, that can be one of the symbol of the next generation. In fact, Harry Potter was born in 1980. So if you count today, he's 34. So the oldest Gen Y or the post-80 generation is now 34. Okay, the youngest, we call it post-90 generation. They just started. Some of them, they just started work. Okay. All right. So let's put things into perspective. Right now in Hong Kong, we have 4 generations simultaneously working in our workforce. Okay? And although we see a lot of symptoms, a lot of problems in the Gen Y, however, they are the extinct generation. Because of the dwindling birth rate. Hong Kong doesn't have the one-child policy, but we have the high, expensive real estate policy. So indirectly, we have one-child policy in Hong Kong as well. So basically, the talent pool is dropping and dropping. Okay. So like it or not, you have no choice to compete for the talent. Okay. When the older generation cannot work anymore, you have to find the new people, and the new people have no other choice but the young generation, right? They say, oh, that's immigration. Unfortunately, this curve, if you plot the mainland Chinese curve, they drop even steeper, right? Okay. Now, I want to, if those who have done the polling, I now want to review the first result, okay? The first question I asked was, how would you describe the next generation in Hong Kong? Okay, let's see the result. Okay, let me do a refresh. Okay, takes a little bit longer. Okay, here. Okay, now, so your first impression is always on the cell phone. They're always on the cell phone, okay? The second highest is they always change jobs. They are very jumpy, okay? And the second highest is also very passive. Very contrary to what we saw outside in the Occupy Central movement. But in the work, they are become umchum. But outside, they just, so why? That's the reason why. That's the question why I want to ask myself, okay? So I did that polling a number of times. That's fairly representative to typical Gen X. I see most of you are Gen X here. Typical impression of the next generation, okay? So mostly negative. All four, these 4 are negative. This self-motivated, the lowest. Okay, they're motivated to go to the street, but not motivated at work. That seems to be the case. Creative, yes, to some extent. Okay, but in general, that confirms one of my research findings. Our negative impression is bigger than the positive impression. Next generation. All right, let's move on. Okay, so essentially, this is the typical look when the Gen Y did some mistake. That's some conflict a lot of times happening in the office. Okay. When I asked a lot of times during my training of the Gen X manager, hey, describe to me your typical Gen Y staff. So typically they have tons and tons of stories. And on my ground, there are tons of leaves. Tons of leaves on the ground, okay? Because of my PhD, I need to read basically all the journals, all the research, all the publication on the Gen X and Gen Y. And one very interesting fact is that in the Western world, like Times Magazine, Newsweek magazine, mostly when they describe the next generation, it's quite neutral. They would describe that, oh, they are very creative, they are the digital generation, yet they have also negative things to say. However, in North China, particularly under the Confucius culture, we are predominantly negative. Not only in Hong Kong, but China, Taiwan, Japan, Korea, most of those countries that are heavily influenced by Confucius, they find that mostly very negative. Partly because I think the current Gen Y, they are more the vocal one. The behavior is quite different than the previous generation. And under Hongzi, that's 君君臣臣父父子子. That's different. You have to behave according to your different class. If you don't behave accordingly, then people will look negative on you. So that's possibly one way the Confucius culture has played a big part of this negative feedback loop. When we see little negative stories, we feed to the media, and the media, the negative story feed back to us. So it becomes a negative feedback loop. Okay? However, I also spend a lot of time interviewing a lot of the Gen Y or the younger generation staff. They would mostly describe the boss as the pharaoh. Okay? So both sides has a lot of negative feelings towards each other. Okay? So it seems like the gap is getting bigger and bigger. And like it or not, after this Occupy Central umbrella movement, I think this gap is going to be even bigger in your home, in your office, and in the society. Now, I want to look at all those perceptions reality? Okay? So first, let me try to help you to answer that question. Okay? So first of all, I want to set it straight. The generation effect is actually made up of two effects. To be really fair, the generation effect is made up of the age effect and the period effect. What does it mean? Age effect is when we look at the younger generation. What is the difference between a 40-year-old person, like me, I'm 45, when I compare to a 20-year-old in 2014, I have 25 years of difference of age. Age equal to different experience, age equal to change a little bit of perspective and mindset too. So is it really fair to just say, oh, the 20 years old, they are all lazy, they are not committed to work? Should we actually discount out the age effect? Okay. The period effect is that actual difference between 20-year-old in 2014 and 20-year-old in 1990. Okay. To be fair, we need to separate that too. But in our mind, when we see some Gen Y negative behavior, our mind would not be that rational to separate the two effects, right? So human nature is emotional animal, okay? So in most of the serious research, because I've done all kind of look at it, most of the serious research, if you discount the age effect, actually there are not that much significant, clear differences between the two generations, okay? All right, so that's one thing. The other thing, one thing for sure, is because of the nutrition and things like that, for the brain and the early child development, the young generation is proven to be highest IQ. Okay, that's a very famous researcher called Flint, effect. So the past 50, 60 years, they have been measuring the IQ. They have to, every decade, reset the norm. Because IQ is always norm at 100. They say, oh, it's always 120, 130, it's very good. It's every year is report like that? No, because every 10 years they need to adjust the norm. So if you have 130 IQ today, they are 180, like 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Okay. Of course, your first question you jump to mind is, does high IQ equal to good employment employee? And we also said EQ and AQ and all the others, of course, right? But at least intelligence-wise, the younger generation has all the scientific proof that they are the most smartest generation. Okay, let me give you a light. So this, sorry for the English-speaking one. So an example of how intelligent they are. One of the Gen Y posted on the Facebook and said, "Oh shit! Oh sorry. Okay, sorry. Put it out." Okay. He said, "Oh boy, my boss want to add me to my Facebook. WTF?" What the? Okay, so that's actually what they mean. But usually the Gen X don't usually know exactly what the acronym means, right? So, but unfortunately, they already add the boss in the Facebook, and the boss immediately say, "What WTF? What does it mean?" Okay, so they say, "Oh, welcome to Facebook." So they're really smart, right? They're really smart. Okay. But that also, this is a little joke to exemplify some of the divide and the gap between the two generations. Okay, now I want to look at the answer of the second question. Okay, I asked the second question, what do you want most from your staff? Okay, let's see the result. Oops. Sorry. Because it just expired my time token. By the way, here has free Wi-Fi. Yeah. Okay. Now I screwed up my thing. Okay. Anyway. All right, so that one, unfortunately I cannot show you the answer because of the internet problem here, but I want to tell you by these questions, I want to show you what the Harvard Business Review just did a very large scale research. They are looking at employee satisfaction, commitment, and engagement, okay? And everybody knows that since you are all HR professional, if your employee is engaged, committed, and also satisfied at work, the productivity usually goes very high, okay? So Harvard Business Review did a very extensive research over 7,000 people. In the US, they find out what is the single most important factor that drive that, okay? And they said, okay, is it the salary? Yes, salary plays some part. Fringe benefit? Yes, it plays some part. But the key factor is, do the staff perceive the boss as good leader? Okay, that's the key. They plot almost a perfect graph like that. So whenever they find something like that, they say, oh, I can graduate my PhD. They find a very good correlation. So the better they think that boss is a good leader, the leadership effectiveness is high, the employee satisfaction go up, the commitment go up, the engagement go up, and vice versa. Okay. So that actually prompts me to ask one question: do different generations have different leadership expectation? Okay, that's my research topic. So that's what I want to find out. Okay, so I did a mixed method study. Sorry for some boring stuff. So it's not the context, right? So I did both quantitative online survey. The sample is not too big, but enough to generate significant result. Unfortunately, the questionnaire is very long. In Hong Kong, it's very hard to ask people to complete a very long survey. So, but statistically, I found enough samples. And then I also did focus group, both Gen X and Gen Y, and asked them about similar questions and see if there are any difference. I did also the content analysis on that. and I do compare both the quantitative and qualitative results. Okay, so first of all, I ask a question. The questionnaire is based on 6 attributes of leadership. Okay, are they sensitive? Are they intelligent? Are they dedicated at work? Are they flexible? Are they dynamic? Have energy? Tyranny. So the last 2 are negative. 2 authoritative, manipulative. Masculinity is not just male. Masculinity in social science means what? Always want to win, want to compete, right? So those 6 attributes, I ask people to fill it out. First key finding, very interesting key finding. Okay, when the result come in, I fully expected a very different result, but I was wrong. Okay, actually, if Mao Wan is a symbol of good leaders, essentially, both sides, when they describe good leaders, are more or less the same. Okay. So basically, the light is really not. This is actually another bar. Okay, the light bar is the pre-80 generation, the Gen X. The darker bar is the post-80 generation. So both are not significantly different. Both are want high sensitive, high intelligence, high dedication, high dynamism, and low in tyranny and low in masculinity. There are no significant difference when they describe good leaders. Okay, I was surprised. I thought that, my initial thinking, sensitivity, the Gen Y must be very sensitive. If the leaders really demonstrate caring, that must be much higher. But in fact, no. Actually, Gen X also wants that as well. Okay, so there are no significant difference between the 2. Okay, however, I ask the same question to describe the actual boss. The actual boss. Before, that graph was to say, describe an ideal leader to me. Now my second question is, using that as a benchmark, describe your boss now. and find out that there are significant gaps of what they think ideal leaders should be and the actual boss. So there are significant gap. Okay? And the gaps are similar across Gen X or Gen Y. Both see that the leaders are not as good as they would hope for. Okay? So that's common sense, right? Why do I need to carry out such a research, right? Everybody knows if my boss is very good, then everybody will be happy, right? Unfortunately, Hong Kong is becoming a very unhappy place because we have a lot of unsatisfaction to our boss, and it can be also to our leaders in our Hong Kong society as well. Okay, so to sum it up for the first key finding, most managers do not use the right leadership for their staff, no matter it's Gen X or Gen Y. Okay. Yet, why we see Gen Y have more problems is that simply they are more vocal. They have more chance to change job. Before in our years, changing job, unemployment rate is still at 5-6%, right? Right now, the last few years is always 3.something%. So they can always change job. They can always go on the street. And right now they not only change job, the number one of losing people when I talk to HR is they go on working holiday in Australia, in Europe, right? So they have much more choice. They know that they cannot afford a house anyway, right? May as well have fun in life. So if they cannot stand the boss, they would have more options than our previous generation. Okay, so both generations show dissatisfaction to the boss. Why Gen Y is more prominent? The problem is that they have more chance to voice out their dissatisfaction. Okay, now remember I did both quantitative and qualitative. The qualitative result finds that by running different focus group and when they talk about leaders, things like that, that confirms essentially the quantitative result, meaning that both generations, pre-80 generation, post-80 generations, they all want leaders to develop others, want to have clear instructions and delegate work to them. Both very much want them to be role models, and both want them not to judge them too quickly. Okay? Yet, when I did the focus group, I found the post-80 and the post-90 generation especially emphasize a few things more. It was also mentioned in Gen X, but not as much. They emphasize personalized relationship. A few of them, when I interviewed with them, they really have a hope that after work, they can go and have a drink with their boss, they can socialize with them, they can build personalized relationship. In our generation, at least in my generation, that is an exception rather than a norm. In current generation, they really want to see if I can have 真情啲, have some personalized relationship. Okay, they want communication. Both sides want communication, but the Gen Y wants two-way communication. Okay, both sides want to be sensitive and care, but they want to be more individualized, really understanding the context, the situation. They also want them to be more attentive to the staff's need. These are all mentioned by the older generation, but not as much. But these are really emphasized by the younger generation. In this side, the older generation, the Gen X, they really emphasize 最緊要有料. My boss really need to show substance. That's a very key things they want to say. I look up to my leader because I think they are really good. They have substance. They also feel feeling secure, right? When people feel secure, they don't play that much politics. Usually when they don't feel secure, they play politics. Okay? Alright? So those are not as mentioned. Those are really heavily mentioned by the older generation. Maybe, perhaps it's because 人生閱歷, the Gen Y lack that in-depth understanding of that, but the Gen X knows that. So these are more emphasized. Okay? Alright. Now, the second key finding, that's very important. That's very important. A little bit of jargon here. Explicit, implicit leadership gap. So that's essentially is, if that is the standard of good leaders, if there is a gap between my actual leader, that's an explicit, implicit gap. Okay? So the bigger the gap is, the lower the leader-follower relationship. Because I don't have a boss that I look up to, that impact my relationship with the boss, and in fact have a very negative impact on job satisfaction and organization commitment. That's significant data to show that strong relationship. So to put it into perspective, like both generations have similar standard of leadership. They all feel Mao Wan is good leaders, okay? Alright. And then they compare to the actual boss. If that's match, then that leads to good relationship with boss, that leads to good job satisfaction, that leads to good organization commitment. On the other hand, if the actual boss is really having a big gap between what they expected and what actually is, then there's bad relationship, bad job satisfaction, and bad communication commitment to the organization. This is a little post that I grabbed from my Facebook, from my Gen Y. They said, 有時候拼搏唔係為咗錢，唔係為咗職位，係一個我認同、一個明白同埋支持、鼓勵我嘅上司。唉，事與願違啦。To put it into English, they said, sometimes when I work hard, it's not because of money, not because of the promotion and position, it's because when I have a boss that understands me, supports me, what the reality is so brutal. Okay, and just grab that from Facebook. Okay, so essentially, the bigger the gap, my standard of good leaders and my actual boss, the worse the leader-follower relationship, and the good relationship means better commitment. Good relationship with the boss also means better job satisfaction. Okay, this result is proven both qualitatively and quantitatively. Okay. So, and you say, oh, it's the same, then what? So the key thing is interesting that I find out is that the post-80 generation are more sensitive. So although we look for the similar good leadership, okay, however, the sensitivity of the Gen Y is higher. What does it mean? So if the gap is just a little bit, they will be very turned off. Okay? So it really boils down to really need the leaders to really establish stronger relationship. Okay? That's the key factor of making your staff happy, engaged, committed, and satisfied with work. Okay? So let's hear a few. When I did interview, I did a few of the
公司嗰度嘅 admin 嘅。
哦，想問下你咧，其實咧喺平時老闆，你覺得老闆有啲乜嘢嘅特質咧，令到係你覺得好欣賞嘅，或者特登覺得有啲老細咧係啲好唔欣賞嘅特質係啲乜嘢咧？
我諗係俾到我哋有一個好輕鬆嘅工作空間啦，即係我諗當然friendly 係好緊要嘅，即係同我哋見到我嘅關係啦。二嚟就係即係佢會係去真係去真係用個心去到唔係淨係為咗 make target 嘅，因為而家好多老闆都係 make target 咁但係咧，如果當個老闆我哋都明白佢都要 make target， 但係咧佢兼顧到我哋同事嘅一啲嘅需求咧，咁樣或者可能一啲嘅心理嘅因素或者生活上面嘅需要啊咁樣，我諗係幾好嘅。even 佢幫唔到我哋咁，我諗我哋幾 appreciate
to the individualized need. Okay, let's hear another one. Oops.
我係從事採購員嘅，咁對我嚟講咧，點樣係為之一個好嘅領袖咧？第一，首先要同佢嘅下屬啦建立一個良好嘅關係啦。如果一個唔識同下屬建立關係嘅老細咧，就自己咧都覺得到最後。
Again, the first thing they talk about is relationship.
咁另外咧，我覺得最差嘅領袖咧係唔識得點樣體恤下屬啦。
Not sensitive, not adaptive to the needs.
例如有啲即係有鑊氣啦，有咩有嘢發生啦。佢第一個時間應該係承擔，跟住解決問題，而唔係去將佢嘅壓力施加落去啲下屬度，因為下屬嗰面嘅壓力嘅時候，佢係 responsible 啲咩？咁如果一個差嘅領袖咧，會點樣影響我嘅工作咧？
What's the impact of a bad leader?
如果有一個好差嘅領袖咧，咁我會好唔想做呢份工啦，因為香港揾工好簡單，唔需要因為一個即係一份工而去好似影響自己嘅生活咯。咁如果一個好嘅領袖咧，咁我會願意，就算幾辛苦都好啦，我都願意喺佢下邊打拼，就係咁啦。
So I've got actually many stories. I'll just give you a few out of my research. Okay. So, but I also asked them another question during my research. Describe to me the other generations. Okay. And all of them, when I asked this question, the whole ground is on lips, right? They will describe the next generation don't understand me. Typically, the younger generation, they all say, oh, the boss is so inflexible, they never listen to my good ideas, they are too authoritative. And when I asked the Gen X to describe the Gen Y, they all said they are all lazy, not committed, and they always want to jump ship, they're always on the cell phone, similar to what you described. However, my research earlier saying that they're both looking up at similar leadership attributes. So there are actually a lot of similar, but in terms of perception, there are a lot of negative impression to the others. Okay? So, and then unfortunately our media has exaggerated the stories. Like look at all the report, mostly they are, because of Hong Kong media, they need to sell and only negative stories sell. Positive stories don't sell. Okay, so that gives a little bit of bias.